Hello, everyone. Buenas tardes a todos. Me llamo Mario Palma, and I am the Vice President of Multilingual Teaching and Learning. And I have the privilege of working in many districts across the country that are in support of bilingual education. I am a former bilingual teacher from New York City, so shout out to all my New Yorkers who are watching, and also have had lots of experiences this past year learning from practitioners such as yourself in the field, trying to get better at incorporating science of reading research into our everyday practices. But I can't do it alone. I have a really amazing team that I have the privilege of working with every single day. And I'm going to ask that they introduce themselves in just a little bit. Some housekeeping. This is our official last Facebook Live for April. There may be more to come, so you want to make sure that you stay tuned for any updates as far as topics and additional dates where we will have Facebook Live sessions. Secondly, a reminder that you all are the ones who help us make the content. This really is a safe space for you to share your questions or your wonderings and best practices as you bring ArtCore curriculum to life in your classrooms. And then lastly, please share in the chat where you are listening in from, what district, what state, where are you from? Where are you bringing your knowledge from during our Facebook Live session? So if you're listening live, put a 1 in the chat box in addition to where you're from. If you are in the replay mode, put a 2 in the chat box after your district or state. And if you're in a hybrid in-person / virtual instructional kind of platform, put a 3, because many of us still are. But we also want to give a shout out to a lot of the districts that have transitioned to in-person instruction. So put a 4 if you are a teacher that has been back in the classroom lately. We're super excited to get to know who is joining us here today. And with that, I want to introduce my 4 trusted colleagues for our ARC Coach Roundtable. How do the IRLA and ENIL improvements impact coaching and conferencing? I'm going to pass it over to my first colleague, Diarra Moss. Diarra, how are you?
Hi, good. How are you, Mario?
Great.
So my name is Diarra. I am an executive coach supporting K-12 schools, across the Northeast. I am a former New York City teacher as well from the Bronx, and I actually had the privilege of having Mario here as my art coach back in the day. And with his wisdom, I followed suit, and I am now part of the art family for the past 5 years, and I'm loving every moment of it. And I'm going to introduce Amelia.
Hi, my name is Amelia Larson, and I am the Executive Vice President of Innovations and Academic Partnerships. And I also served in a public school system for about over 20 years, working in different capacities. But I also worked in the private sector under a developmental pediatrician, where I was a part of the evaluation team that looked at reading difficulties. So lots of fun. I'm very passionate about getting all kids to read. And internally at ARC, I've been here for about 6.5 years. I coach some projects. And we also created an internal team that took a deep dive into the science of reading for the past 2 years. And with that studying and reflecting, we looked at different aspects of what we already did that needed to be clarified and what improvements we had to make to ensure that all kids have the opportunities that they need. So I'm glad to be here and learning from you.
Thank you. We'll pass it on to Michelle.
Yeah. All right. My name is Michelle Lynch, and I serve as the Vice President of Customer Engagement at American Reading Company. I've been with the company for 12 years, working in the curriculum and instruction side of things. So I know the materials pretty deeply, but I also, like the rest of this group, I coach in the field. And I have a couple projects in Providence, Rhode Island. Shout out to my projects. And so I'm looking forward to kicking us off.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And just a reminder, we started talking about improvements during our last few sessions. And today we're going to lean in with even some more focus on specific pages. So take it away, Michelle. Thanks again.
All righty. All right, so if you're looking for the information that we shared last time, that was on April 7th. So if you're in the teacher network, you can go back to April 7th for what all the specific improvements were. Today, we're really going to kind of talk about a subset of those and the ways that they impact our coaching with teachers in the field and our conferring with students. A quick note that if you're a school pay subscriber, you do have access to several of the key pages that we will talk about today in the IRLA Resource Center. So you just want to look under innovations. You can click innovations, or you can put 2021 in the search bar, and that's going to help you find those key pages. All right, so let's dig right in and talk about this Power Words page, because 2 Green is the arena where we've had the most change happening, right? So, as far as the Power Words page, I think I'll first speak to just what exactly has changed, and then we can talk about the why. So what exactly has changed? We have cut down to 50 Power Words here. So it got a little bit of a haircut and a reorganization in terms of just pointing out what has irregular letter sound correspondences and what words are completely regularly decodable. So that's kind of the major shift there. And then I wonder, Amelia, do you want to ground this in the research and the science?
Sure. So I think it's important in terms of our changes overall, that we are really putting an emphasis on kids learning the power words so they become sight words through more than just memorization. So in yellow, we start with a very heavy, once the kids have awareness of words, then we start with a heavy emphasis of phoneme, grapheme, correspondence, lots of practice on that. And then they start applying and continuing to learn, reinforce that phoneme, grapheme, correspondence by learning power words. And in learning power words, what we're trying to do is to ensure that kids really have awareness of the words that they are saying. Then they connect that to the letter strings, that letter sequence that they are seeing, and then they practice spelling. This happens across time. It doesn't happen overnight, but we're really trying to turn the child's attention towards the structure of the word and then giving them the opportunity to skywrite and then practice. This is what it takes for kids to orthographically map chunks or whole words so it really becomes a sight word. Every word wants to be a sight word when it grows up. I think it's important. It's not just the power words, it's all words. So we are making sure that we are hitting on all 3 of these things consistently, because this is what research, including Linnea Aries research, really highlights as being critical.
Yeah, I was so thankful for you bringing that up. And Diara, maybe you can weigh in on this. If you were a teacher like me, you had a very clear understanding of what sight words were before, and you understood them to be high frequency words. So Diara, can you talk a little bit about why we are now calling them high frequency words consistently to make sure that we're understanding the difference between high frequency words and sight words? Could you weigh in on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think when most people think of the word of sight word, they think the student, like Amelia had said, has to memorize that word. And that's not the case. They're attuned to the sounds of the word and matching the sounds to the letter strings. And so we just want to be consistent in our language so that people are not don't have the misconception of that term sight word. But any word, whether it's regular or irregular, like we have now separated on our power word check for 2 Green, which words can be regular and which words are irregular, but all of them are treated and instructed in the same way using our power word protocol that is in the toolkits and in the KM1 instructional framework. And I think as one big coaching move when I'm thinking about the power words really is, which words do students already know instantaneously and effortlessly? And which words do they use in their writing? Which words do they read when they're reading texts, right? Because we want ample opportunities to practice. And then where do they need additional support? And those are the words that I can instruct on. Those are the words I will use my Power Word protocol to teach students, and then have all the fun and games with the centers and the activities that a lot of teachers know and love. And maybe because of COVID, haven't used too much this year, but hopefully we'll be back in that realm next year where kids can get their hands touching everything and working with each other to play those games once the words have been taught.
Yeah, I mean, I know for me, that statement that Amelia said, all words want to be sight words, right? I think that's going to be really helpful in terms of us using that appropriate language. And a word that you use, Diara, practice. If Michelle can forward to the next slide, I want to underscore how we go about the process of orthographic mapping, right? It's all underscored with ample opportunities for practice. So all three of these need to live together in order for orthographic mapping to occur. But without ample opportunities for practice, are we really positioning students for independence? Michelle, you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So I think Diara hit on something that is just huge. And I think, Mario, when you talked about, your own experience in the classroom, like what I think back to is, right, that like the thing to do was to do the rainbow word, to play bingo with the words, to do all of these things. And they're all lovely and kids love them. And certainly they learn from them. But I think that what Diara hit on is key is that, like, again, this goes back to if I knew then what I know now, right? If I knew then, I would have been doing much more by way of, help making sure that kids were hearing those sounds, helping them map the symbols to the sounds, and then giving them that repetitive practice.
Yeah, one thing that I love about the toolkits, because this page is in the toolkits that you see the image on the left, is that we situate everything, not just in practice, but also highlighting the contextualized nature of orthographic mapping. And just a shout out to multilingual learners and teachers of multilingual learners, you have to have contextualized approaches when you are orthographically mapping for students, particularly with language learners, because that's how they learn. They learn by using language in context. So you'll see evidence of that, this three-pronged protocol, but situated within practice with actual books. So just want to underscore the importance of that. Michelle, what else?
That's so important, because if kids don't even recognize the word, they can go through but if they don't even recognize it, they don't become meaningful letter strings. So the next time they come across, they're going to decode it again. I do, Mario, think, listening to Diara and Michelle talking about the protocols that we do have for kids that are having difficulty. I want to point out to what Michelle said, because when kids are having difficulty, you really have to start unpacking what can be behind, what is the underlying cause of the student's difficulty, and then pivot your instruction to help the kid. So we have to ask ourselves, can they detect the sounds within spoken words, right? Can they blend orally and segment orally? And then you start connecting that to what they see in print. Once they do that, you start thinking about, are they developing automaticity, right? Can they apply it now to real text? Can they use it in writing? So having these questions to unpack when kids are having difficulty is really critical, so we can pivot to meet their needs.
So important.
I think the other thing that's key here, and this is something Amelia and I have been talking, and the rest of the science of reading team really have been talking about a lot lately, is the importance of the reading and the writing happening, together, right? Because of the reciprocity that happens there. So I don't know, Amelia, if you have a footnote about that you want to share.
Yeah, I think that at ARC, we love Holly Scarborough's graphic representation of skilled reading, and how language comprehension and word recognition has all the strands that come together. I think what is important here in thinking about Holly is the fact that the strands do have to come together, but more than that, there's an interdependency of the parts. When you are working on one thing, you are impacting the other. Working on word recognition impacts spelling. Working on spelling impacts word recognition. So they are not separate things that they are connected in our brain. In the brain of skilled readers, their neural pathways is absolutely automatic. They see a word and immediately it triggers the meaning in the speech. It's like a flash. So we cannot think about separating these things, or when we're working on one thing, we're not impacting the other.
I don't know about you, but any conversation roundtable that talks about neural pathways and the love of reading, I'm there. What else we got, Michelle? What are we looking at here? Is this this looks like a 1G lesson, huh?
That was the 1G lesson. Just, Mario, as you were talking about the explicit inclusion of these components that we talked about earlier in that three circle diagram, just showing that those three components are in the toolkit lesson. So, by way of coaching and conferencing, just making that connection. And I just want to go back a minute, if we can, to the regular and irregular, because I do think that there's a good point to be made here about how we coach across both types of these words, right? And this goes back to this entire, think about the phonological awareness, the phonics, and the ample opportunities for practice. And that we are essentially teaching these words in the same way that we would teach any other word, which is to teach kids to leverage the known letter sound correspondences that they have, knowing full well that at this phase in their development, they might still be working in the partial alphabetic phase, so we might be teaching them to leverage some of the consonant sounds first, and eventually they'll make their way around to the vowels. But that they can get pretty far with those consonants just to start. Anything to add?
Yeah, you mentioned vowel sounds, and I know that many kiddos, not just multilingual learners, particularly multilingual learners, but many kiddos sometimes are held back inadvertently by teachers who are feeling like they're doing due diligence in making sure that all the power words that come up at this reading level are mastered for success. But we've established a passing lane to make sure that kiddos who are stepping into the full alphabetic phase of orthographic mapping with one-syllable words have a chance to start to grow within the next reading level. Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So, as we looked at 2 Green, we were really thinking about how do we create a pathway for both the kids that are working in the partial alphabetic phase and the kids who are really ready to bridge and are starting to move into full alphabetic decoding. And one of the things that we're conscious of, and this goes to, our how does this impact my coaching and conferencing point, is that for me, I'm constantly aware of behaviors, right? So I'm looking for the student behavior as an indicator for when to move them, as opposed to letting the power word list drive my decision making, right? So let the kid's behavior drive the decision more so than the power word list. So we're going to work on that power word list, but as soon as it looks like they're ready to start using power words like all and using them to read like ball and small, then we might be ready to move forward. So you can see on the passing lane page, we say, if the student's successful with this skill, let's check the other 1 blue entry requirements, because of course we want to make sure they can comprehend too.
The whole purpose of leveling is to find the highest level that a student can read independently and proficiently. So the passing lane might be a student's access to that highest level that they can operate independently and proficiently at. There's a question in the chat box from Cindy Alvear, and that she has noted a lot of the toolkit SOR, Science of Reading updates, and she's asking if they are in the IRLA and the ENIL. That is the purpose of this discussion and the last discussion on April 7th, is to make sure that all of our teachers understand the updates in the frameworks, in the toolkits, and now finally in the IRLA and the ENIL, to work as part of this comprehensive system with the Science of Reading updates fully articulated and called out. So yes, Cindy, we are absolutely updating the IRLA and the ENIL, and you'll see evidence of that, not just in 1G and 2G, but across multiple levels. Does anybody else want to speak to that? Is there something that we should be excited about coming next?
I think what is important is that to point out, like we started with the frameworks and the toolkits, and the changes now in the IRLA, it's a catch up. But what you are seeing in the IRLA and the ENIL had already been shifted in both the frameworks and also the K1 frameworks and also the toolkits. So it was just like a question of catching up.
And can I just add something about the way in which we're using the IRLA hasn't changed, right? We're still observing students. We're still becoming better kid watchers through the use of the IRLA. And that is not changing. So just give some comfort there.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about student observation, you're going to spend a lot of time in OneBlue because of all the growth that happens, right? I mean, Michelle, I know that there's some updates to OneBlue as well. Do we want to go to OneBlue, or is there something in 2G you wanted to spend some time on?
Just before we leave 2G, in thinking about the passing lane, the 3 points that we have added under the power words, the coaching power words, those are key look fors that we are looking for across time. That tells you a lot. Remember what I said, learning to decode impacts spelling. Learning to spell impacts decoding. Our kids are practicing spelling. And I'll tell you, when they get to the point that they can spell it, you know that they can read it. And it's in their brain. So you might see actually an acceleration through green because of this protocol and this very intentional and deliberate type of practice. That's it. That's all. I just wanted to make sure.
I think there might actually be one more thing in green that we didn't talk too much about, but it's worth mentioning for the group, which is just the reorganization of these category words, right? So we had a page of category words in the IRLA. You can see on the left the ones that are really critical for reading to green text. These are in lots and lots of to green texts. The ones on the right are in a few to green texts, but they're really words that are intended for vocabulary development. So when you score them in your IRLA, coming back to the coaching and conferencing bit, you want to make sure that you're scoring them under the vocabulary section as the bold print indicates, right?
Yeah,
so
I mean,
when we get to using the new IRLA.
We know that there are benefits, right, for category words for multilingual learners because they have a semantic meaning, a relationship with one another. And so they may be low occurring in 2G text, but we know the value of incorporating them into your read alouds, into your interactive writing, into your oracy development, because of the value of building up that vocabulary with multilingual learners. So it's still there, it's still important. We've just recategorized it for you.
Yeah. And I think one thing Diara and I have talked about is just how important some of these words are in terms of phonograms, right? So when we get into moving from 2 green to 1 blue, this is a great place to make that bridge. But when we move over to 1 blue, we know that, you know, we're really focused on getting kids to be able to read with automaticity these 37 phonograms that Wiley and Durrell have identified as being high leverage. Right. And so when you look at our list of category words, you see words like black or 9 is somewhere on here. There's 9, and pink is on here, you know. So some of those words that are in the category word list are really going to help kids unlock a whole bunch of other words as they move into 1 blue, as they move into working across the word.
I would imagine being transparent with kiddos about that, right? That the more words you're acquiring knowledge around, whether it be through reading or writing, that reciprocity, that is going to be an inherent scaffold that you can use yourself to access more difficult text. I mean, what's more compelling than that, right? The level of agency that you're instilling in your students is beyond. So thanks for that reminder, Michelle.
Yeah. All right. So next we've got the onset rhyme check. As we move into 1 blue, the onset rhyme check, and you know, just thinking about from a coaching standpoint, you know, if I have a student who might be having some difficulty with chunking single syllable words, this onset rhyme check might help me identify whether that is coming from a phonics lens, or if I actually have to back up a little bit, because maybe this student isn't yet able to segment blend onset and rhyme. So I don't know, Amelia, do you want to talk a little bit about?
I think that's the case. Again, when kids are not successful truly unpacking it and taking the scaffolding to the next level, but watching it first. Don't assume that you have to engage in direct teaching of everything for them to learn. Because like if you increase scaffolding and you get, like sometimes I'll take sticky notes and I'll show them the sounds in the sticky notes without seeing anything, then they see it and they attach to the sticky notes. It's a heavy scaffolding, but they should be able to then take that on and apply it to the other ones. We have to teach for proficiency and independence, not just proficiency. It's like Mario said, they need to start internalizing these moves that we are teaching them in order to apply it. If you only engage in direct teaching and you do not give them opportunities to practice, you are actually turning them into dependent learners.
Amelia, we have a question in the chat box, and we have about maybe 5 minutes left in our conversation. The time flies, right, when you're having fun. The question is about the nature of decodable text. Our presenter, our question asker, it mentions 1G, but I think the term decodable text is worth leaning into just for language sake. Did you want to talk a little bit about how we understand decodable text and what we understand them to be?
Well, I think what is important is that we talk about now in kindergarten with the changes that we have made. We have a combination of predictable texts. We have decodable texts, and we also have controlled texts. So we have all three types of texts. But I think it is really important for us to separate independent level from the instructional level, right? So if a kid has never held a book in their lives, they come in, they have no concepts of print, they don't have letter sound, they just speak, but they have no idea that how to trap words within speech in order to track. We are prepared to respond. We are not going to act surprised. We have a read to me plan from day one, no apologies. That kid should get 500 books read to them for the first 30 days of school. At the end of the 30 days, they should no longer be there. This is not like the black hole of read to me. This is a non-ramp to give them what they need to then enter 3Y, where the focus now shifts. Well, they go from tracking words to now the focus shifts to phoneme, grapheme, correspondence. This is important because, like, if the IRLA developmental taxonomy follows the same theory that has been proven by linear array, and it starts with some kids come in pre-alphabetic. Our job is to recognize those behaviors and engage in instruction that moves them to the next level, right? So we go from the use of predictable text for the kids that need it. Some kids don't need it. The teachers will know who needs it and who doesn't, and for what purpose. Some kids will go into predictable text just for 3Y, where they are starting to really learn words and then initial sounds, and then they go right on to green. We cannot assume that every kid follows the same pattern at the independent level. So then we go to controlled texts. Controlled texts are green texts where we have a combination of words that kids are learning through the Power Word protocol, and they have some words that they have not seen that they will need to use the picture. Now, this is like a stage, a temporary stage. We are picture readers. We are world readers. we had to, through our instruction, call attention to the things that the kids are not doing. Now, in yellow, if they are looking at pictures and they are generating speech that matches the pictures, I'm happy. If they are learning vocabulary by looking at real pictures of things that they didn't know, I'm happy. In blue, that's not acceptable. Not acceptable. They shouldn't be looking at the picture to read a word. They shouldn't be looking at my face to read a word. In green, I don't want them to look at the picture for words that they shouldn't be, but there are things that are still okay because it's still partial alphabetic. We move them by instructing and turning their attention to things that they are not attending yet, but we don't take assets away from them. I'm not doing it for my grandchildren. Why would I do it for other people's children?
I always love it when Amelia drops these bombs of knowledge to kind of wrap up these really, really complex concepts. I just like, we don't throw away the assets, what's available to them, I think is super important, but we also want them to be able to rely on the actual structure of the word to be able to do it. So can we have both, right? It's interesting. It's an interesting point that you're making.
But you have to look at the developmental stage to understand what is an acceptable behavior and then coach the kid to do something that they are not doing naturally, right? Yeah. So I was coaching at a district that we were doing some levels checks, and the teachers came with the kids, and this student, the levels were accurate, but the student was reading independently. She could handle the struggles of 1B text independently. But she came to a word and she looked at the picture, and then she looked at the teacher. And I'm going like, what happened just now? She can't read. So she got to the end, and I went back to that page and I said, can you look at this word over here? What does the word say? What do the sounds say? And she read it. And I said, can you tell me why you looked at the picture? Because the picture didn't help you. Can you tell me why you looked at the face of the teacher? Because she doesn't have letters in her face. So then I said to her, what does your teacher tell you to do when you come to a word you don't know? And she described the chunking process. So I said, don't you get lazy on me. No. You are not a baby anymore. You can handle this. So you have to coach the kids, and you can't. I mean, it's okay. Illustrations always enhance comprehension, but illustration should not be used to decode.
Yeah, I think what's most important is that you reminded that student to use their devices, right? To use the assets that are available to them, which include phonics, knowledge of phonics and how the words in English work. So a really huge reminder. I think, Michelle, you have maybe one or two different tools to show as we wrap up.
I think there's just two left. Okay. I think this is one of my favorite updates, because this has happened across levels, and we know that this has huge impact for so many kids, right? So the big change here is, if you have not taken a look at the IRLA guide for coaching multilingual learners, I definitely encourage you to do that, because there is great content in that guide. And if you have school pace access, you can find that again through the IRLA Resource Center. But the big change here is just in the cold read record, we've borrowed from the cold read record companion in that guide, and brought in just, an indicator, so that as we're coaching and conferencing, that those of us that are monolingual, that we are attending to anything that might be evidence of language development, and really situating that separately from any kind of reading error.
Yeah, and, language and literacy are so interconnected that often what might show up as a literacy-based error really has language development implications. And I'll use one example to ground truth. We were working with a student in one of our partner districts in White Plains, and a student who was an avid reader was reading the sentence, "A mother bird sat on her egg." And he read the word sat, a CVC short A word, with ease, and then changed it to sit. And we're looking at the student as if, what was going on there? Because an untrained ear and eye, right, an observer, well-meaning, might think, well, the student might need short A vowel sounds, right? So I think we would note that down, and the further we investigated, we realized, well, sit is an irregular past tense verb, sit versus sat, that the student had not acquired yet in his acquisition of English. Brilliant, right? So the mind of a language learner in reconciling all of the assets and information they have about the language that they're learning available to them, seeing that process in real time, we want to make sure we're making the right instructional decisions as we are kid watching, as Diara reminded us of. So this language development piece is to help us do that. The word sit versus sat, that irregularly spelled verb, a past tense verb, that would be a new word in English, essentially. You'll see the pronunciation or accent as a column as well. I know for me, I had to train my ear in the ways that language learners often pronounce certain words that were new to them. Those are not literacy-based errors, right? That's language learner making sense of the new language as they're learning to read in it. So hopefully this is a step in the right direction to help teachers be able to become even better student observers, as Diara put it.
Well, I just want to add one thing. I know we're so close in time about this, is because you shared something with me so brilliantly a few years ago about disrupting that monolingual space, right? Is that how you framed it? Because if you, like Michelle said, if you're coming with a monolingual lens, you're not looking for these things. So we're trying to train you to disrupt that space and to start to analyze those errors for what they really are, not just phonics or reading errors.
Yeah, these are insights into the bilingual brain. So inviting a multilingual space, right, into our practice. Awesome. What else we got, Michelle?
I think this one is a pretty quick one. This is just within OneBlue that we've broken down the foundational skills section into the different zones of OneBlue, right? So this is really going to make it much easier for teachers to find a power goal that is appropriate when they've identified a specific zone that the student is working in. So when our kiddos are coming in and they're working in zone 1 and they're just learning to use in and all and at, and throw an onset onto the beginning of those, that there's a specific power goal that would be appropriate there, and that we're not rushing them forward necessarily into using final E and all of these things. That's all going to come in due time, right? But maybe not right up front. So this is just a great support.
Yeah, there's so much learning that happens in OneBlue. Any help that you can give me as a teacher to help me organize how to bring a student through that full alphabetic stage, I welcome all the help I can get. I know I speak for everyone listening in, and how thankful I am that you all were able to carve out time in your schedules to help us understand some of the updates in the IRLA and the ENIL. A shout out to all of the teachers who are sharing content, questions, all the Cindys of the world. Cindy, you weighed in so much in this conversation. Even on replays, please add your questions. We do make an effort to answer any and all questions that do show up. So please stay tuned at American Reading on our Twitter handle and account for the new dates for our Facebook Live and new content. You can always visit our website for some of the updates also highlighted on the science of reading for our materials. And last but not least, in the comment section in our teacher network. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye, friends.